Welcome, students from Great Hollow and Akamsit Middle Schools. Today you will hear some spooky tales told to you by your teachers. We hope you enjoy. Have a happy Halloween.
Hi, this is Mrs. Fierstein, and I'm a teacher at Great Hollow, 7th grade teacher, and I'm going to be reading a spooky story to you. This is called Footsteps. Liz was doing her homework at the dining room table. Her younger sister, Sarah, was asleep upstairs. Their mother was out, but she was expected back at any minute. When the front door opened and shut, Liz called, "Hello, Mama!" But her mother didn't answer, and the footsteps Liz heard were heavier, like a man's. "Who's there?" she called. No one replied. She heard whoever it was walk through the living room, then up to the stairs to the second floor. The footsteps moved from one bedroom to another. Again, Liz called, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Then she thought, "Oh my God, Sarah is in her bedroom." She ran upstairs to Sarah's room. Only Sarah was there, and she was asleep. Liz looked in the other rooms, but found no one. She went back down to the dining room, scared out of her wits. Soon she heard footsteps again. They were coming down the stairs into the living room. Now they went into the kitchen. Then the door between the kitchen and the dining room slowly began to open. "Get out!" Liz screamed. The door slowly closed. The footsteps moved out of the kitchen, through the living room, toward the front door. The door opened and shut. Liz ran to the window to see who it was. No one was in sight, nor were there any footprints in the fresh snow that had been falling. Have a great Halloween!
Hello, everybody. This is Miss Siska, and today you're going to hear a poem about someone who talked to witches but couldn't spell. Ooh. The story is, or the poem is, Annabelle and the Witches by Mike Gower. Now listen up closely so this doesn't happen to you.
Once upon a time, there was a girl called Annabelle. Her mother said she was a sweet little girl, a dear little girl, a nice little girl. But Annabelle didn't like that one little bit, because Annabelle wanted to be a witch. Not any old kind of witch. No, Annabelle wanted to be a nasty witch, an ugly witch, a nasty, ugly, evil witch. The only trouble was Annabelle didn't know any witches. So she was having a hard time learning how to be nasty, ugly, and evil. Until one day she had a brilliant idea. She looked up witch in the phone book, and she found witch, N-U-N-E, Ltd, on the common, and a phone number, Nasty Weather 1200. But when she rang the number, all she got was a nasty, ugly, evil, slurping noise. The witch's phone number had been cut off. So Annabelle wrote the address on the back of her hand, waited until the weather was really nasty, and went to the common, all alone. When she got there, she saw 3 witches dancing around a big black pot, and they were singing, "Hubble, bubble, boils and spots, gravy full of slimy clots, smelly socks and filthy rags, and things that live in dust-in bags. "That was great," shouted Annabelle. "Let me have a go. I want to be a witch too." The nastiest, ugliest, most evil-looking witch spun around. She glared at Annabelle. Then she asked a nasty question. "Can you spell?" "Yes," said Annabelle. "A bit." "You can't be a witch without a spell," sang all the witches together. "And you can't make a spell until you can S-P-E-L-L, spell." "I'll show you," said the nastiest, ugliest, most evil witch, and she began to sing in a voice so scratched and tuneless that it made Annabelle's teeth cringe. "Slow and slimy, cold and clammy, like a lump of uncooked liver, green, revolting, slithering slug, slug with silver slime trail oozing, S-L-U-G I spell, and slug you be." And Annabelle felt her body shrink, smaller and smaller, and her skin became cold and wet, and suddenly all she could see stretching high above her were stalks of grass as tall and thick as apple trees. And the tiny grains of soil felt like great rocks beneath her one wet foot, and all she could hear was the cackle of the witches laughing at her. Then the ugliest, nastiest, most evil witch stopped laughing. She cleared her throat and began to sing another song. "Porker in the pigsty grunting, swell my swill pig fat with lard, balloon of bacon, pink and pudgy, P-I-G, pig, I spell, and pig you be." And as the witch sang the last line of the spell, Annabelle turned back from a slug into a girl, but only for a moment. Annabelle felt herself swell, and the pretty pink bow her mother had tied at the back of her dress became a pink curly tail. And the pretty pink bow her mother had tied in her hair turned into 2 huge flapping ears. "Stop it," she shouted. "It's horrible." But the only sound that came out of her little piggy snout was Annabelle looked up with her little pink poggy eyes and saw the witches nearly splitting their broomsticks laughing. Even the wicked black cat was laughing. Then the nastiest, ugliest, most evil witch wiped the tears from her eyes with the filthiest handkerchief that Annabelle had ever seen and sang, "As you were, not grunting pig, nor slithering slug, but as before, everything be like it was, and let you be." Annabelle, Annabelle. And Annabelle was back on the common as a girl, alone. The witches had vanished, but she could still hear a nasty, ugly, evil laugh, echoing in the darkness. There was nothing left, so Annabelle started to walk home. But as she walked, she sang, "Slug was nasty, slimy, horrid. Pig I never want to be. Everyone, please, leave me alone. Just let me be Annabelle. Let me be me." Which wasn't bad for a beginner, was it?
Rupert lived with his dog in a house deep in the woods. Rupert was a hunter and a trapper. The dog was a big German shepherd named Sam. Rupert had raised Sam since he was a pup. Almost every morning, Rupert went hunting, and Sam stayed behind and guarded the home. One morning, as Rupert was checking his traps, he got the feeling that something was wrong at home. He hurried as fast as he could, but when he got there, he found Sam was missing. He searched the whole house and the woods nearby, but Sam was nowhere to be found. He called and called, but the dog did not answer. For days, Rupert looked. I called for Sam, but he could not find no trace of him. Finally, he gave up and went back to his work. But one morning, he heard a loud noise moving in the attic. He picked up his gun. Then he thought, I'd better be quiet about this. So he took off his boots and in his bare feet he began to climb the attic stairs. He slowly took one step, then another, until he reached the attic door. He stood outside listening, but he didn't hear a thing. Then he opened the door. Ah! You'd scream too if you stepped on a nail in your bare feet.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Gower, and I'm going to share a poem that is really based on a song that I knew in childhood. It's an Irish children's song, but it's a little bit spooky. So you'll notice the mood changes as the story goes along. It's called The Man Who Lived in Leeds. There was a man who lived in Leeds, who sowed his garden full of seeds. And when the seeds began to grow, it was like a garden filled with snow. But when the snow began to melt, it was like a ship without a belt. And when the ship began to sail, it was like a bird without a tail. And when the bird began to fly, it was like an eagle in the sky. And when the sky began to roar, it was like a lion at my door. And when my door began to crack, it was like a stick upon my back. And when my back began to smart, it was like a penknife in my heart. And when my heart began to bleed, then I was dead, dead, dead indeed.
Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Ryan, and today I will tell you a story about my friend Robert here. It's called The Enchanted Doll. Robert is no ordinary doll. People say he's enchanted. Robert's made of cloth, stuffed with hair and straw. He stands 3 feet tall, has dull black eyes with monkey-like features. The doll was given to a young boy by his family's bohemian maid. It was said that the maid practiced voodoo. The young boy, Robert Eugene Otto, loved his doll so much, he even gave it a name. His name, Robert. From then on, the young boy decided to go by his middle name of Eugene. As a young boy, Eugene developed a strange fascination with Robert. He spent long hours alone in his room talking with the doll. Whenever things went wrong in his house, Eugene always knew who to blame. He would say, "It was Robert. Robert did it." Eugene Otto became a talented and celebrated artist. He liked to paint at home in seclusion, but always with Robert by his side. After a trip to Paris, Eugene met and fell in love with a concert pianist named Anne. After marrying, Eugene purchased his old family home as a wedding gift to Anne, and soon introduced Robert as a member of the family. Eugene's new wife, Anne, thought it was a little strange that a grown man was still attached to his boyhood doll, and instantly took a disliking to Robert. She didn't like her husband's obsession with the doll. Still, she humored him, and Robert was given a room of his very own way up in the attic. There Robert stayed until one day when Eugene told his wife that Robert was angry and demanded a room with a view. Despite her objections, she moved Robert out of the attic and into the turret room. Robert was then seated at the window overlooking the street. Children on their way to school said they saw Robert through the windows, moving about the turret room, glowering at them. Inside the house, Eugene became increasingly irrational and violent, smashing things and lashing out at his wife and screaming like a madman. Then all of a sudden, he would come himself again. Gene would always say exactly the same thing. It was Robert. Robert did it. Robert's influence seemed to grow stronger and stronger. A plumber working alone in the turret room one day fled the house in terror. When asked later, he said that he heard Robert giggling. Other visitors to the Otto's house swore they saw Robert's expression change when they looked at him. Sometimes they said that he looked like pure evil. Over time, Gene became sicker and sicker, becoming so despondent, he locked himself away in the turret room until he finally died with Robert the doll by his side. Free at last, Anne fled the house and moved to Boston, leaving Robert behind in the attic. The new owners discovered him soon after moving in. They took one look at Robert and knew that this, whatever it was something they definitely did not want in their home. Today, Robert sits in the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where he holds an eerie fascination for everyone who sees him.
There was a haunted house where every night a bloody head fell down the chimney. At least that's what people said. So nobody would stay there overnight. Then a rich man offered $1,000 to whoever would do it. And this boy said he would try if he could have his dog with him. So it was all settled. The very next night, the boy went to the house with his dog. To make it more cheerful, he started a fire in the fireplace. Then he sat down in front of the fire and waited, and his dog waited with him. For a while, nothing happened. But a little after midnight, he heard someone singing softly and sadly off in the woods. The singing sounded something like this. Me Tadoti Waka. It's just somebody singing, the boy told himself, but he was frightened. Then his dog answered the song. Softly and sadly it sang, Lin chicken chikali mali dingo dingo. The boy could not believe his ears. His dog had never uttered a word before. Then a few minutes later, he heard the singing again. Now it was closer and louder, but the words were the same. Me Tadoti Waka. This time the boy tried to stop his dog from answering. He was afraid that whoever was singing would hear it and come after them. But his dog paid no attention, and again it sang, Lin chicken chikali mali dingo dingo. A half hour later, the boy heard the singing again. Now it was in the backyard, and the song was the same. Me Tadoti Waka. Again, the boy tried to keep his dog quiet, but the dog sang out louder than ever, Lin chicka chikali mali dingo dingo. Soon, the boy heard the singing again. Now it was coming down the chimney. Me Tadoti Waka. The dog sang right back, Lin chicka chikali mali dingo dingo. Suddenly, a bloody head fell out of the chimney. It missed the fire and landed right next to the dog. The dog took one look and fell over, dead from fright. The head turned and stared at the boy. Slowly, it opened its mouth and... Ah!
This is the story of Little Eddie and Little Freddie and the night before Halloween. Little Eddie and Little Freddie were sitting at the dinner table with their mother and father, eating their Little Vinnie's pizza. Little Eddie said to his mother, Mom, I've finished all my pizza and I've eaten all my garlic knots. May I be excused? The mother looked at Little Eddie and said, Well, I guess so, if you kind of knock off that British accent. You're from Wisconsin, not Britain. And little Eddie kind of just looked at little Freddie and said, oh, okay. You see, little Eddie and little Freddie had decided that because it was the night before Halloween, they would go to bed early, get lots of sleep, so they'd be all rested up for Halloween the next night. Very good plan. So little Eddie and little Freddie, they went upstairs. They went into their bedroom. They both got into each other's beds and slept, lied down, and tried to go to sleep. It was a beautiful, beautiful evening. The moon was shining. It was calm. It was peaceful. A gentle breeze was blowing through the open window. A perfect night to sleep. A perfect night to get rest before Halloween. When all of a sudden, a big boom occurred. What was that? Little Eddie said to little Freddie. I don't know. And all of a sudden the wind started howling. Ooh! It started to rain. It started to pour thunder, lightning. It was as scary as anything. Boom! Little Eddie and Freddie were scared. It was so peaceful. It was so calm. And yet now, the night before Halloween, the winds were howling, the rain, the thunder, the lightning. And then the worst thing imaginable could have happened. Their TV light went out. And at the same time, their iPod and their iPhone lost power. They were now in complete darkness. They were scared. And to make matters worse, they heard this big, loud sound from downstairs. They both looked at each other. What was that, Eddie? I don't know, Freddie. And then they started to hear this creeping sound coming up the steps. And little Freddie looked at Freddie. Little Eddie looked at Freddie. Freddie looked at Eddie. Eddie looked at Freddie. And they started shivering and they started crying. And the sound kept coming up the stairs. And the wind was howling, and the thunder, and the lightning, and it was as scary as could be. And that sound, that awful sound, was getting louder and louder. And it was getting closer. And Freddie was scared, and Eddie was scared. And it got louder, and it got closer, and then it was at the door. They saw the handle in the glistening light of the moon that had shined through a little piece of the cloud start to turn. As soon as the door opened, it went completely black again. And all they saw was a shadow walking into the room. They didn't want to look. They were so scared. And all of a sudden the lightning started blasting away, and the rain and the wind, and it was the scariest thing ever. And they looked up, and the shadow got closer and closer and closer. And they were both looking up at the shadow. And it came closer to them and closer to them. It was tall. It was dark, and they could not see who it was, but it was scary. It was so scary. And then all of a sudden, the shadow came right up to their bed, and it looked down upon them, and it said, "Did you boys remember to do your homework?"
Buenos dias. I'm Mrs. Diliberto, and I'm going to be reading for you La Muerta, Godmother Death, by Doug Lippman. It is a story from Mexico. Well, there was a poor peasant in Mexico named Antonio. He was so weak and so impoverished that if you wanted to hire him, you'd have to feed him for a week before he'd have enough strength to do a day's work. But this year, on the Day of the Dead, something happened in Antonio's life. To Antonio and his wife was born a new child. They had already 8 children, although 4 were in the Campo Santo and no longer needed to be fed. But to have a child born on the Day of the Dead, that was a good sign. Antonio said, "This child would change things for us. I will go off and find a godmother, a madrina. I will make sure this one has the qualities we want. I will make sure she can offer him all the important things, justice and mercy, and especially power." So Antonio left his family and went off alone into the world to find a madrina. And as he walked along, he sang, "A godparent for my newborn child I am seeking at this hour. It should be someone who can provide him with justice, mercy, and with power." Antonio saw a rich carriage pulled by splendid horses. It was the señora who owned the hacienda. The window of the coach opened. "Antonio, why do you walk alone? Why are you not with your family on this day?" Antonio said, "I have a new child born today." "Ah, are you looking for a madrina for such a special child born on the Day of the Dead? I would make a fine godparent. My family is rich and old. We could surely give him riches and power. His toys would be made of gold." Antonio said, for any other child, Antonio would have been honored to have this wealthy woman as madrina. But for this child, he said, "You are rich and powerful, that is true, but you are not just and you are not merciful. Your children play with golden toys, while mine, so close by, starve. No, this child deserves more than you can provide." Antonio walked ahead into the day. Off in the fields, he saw a woman dressed in rags, but with a youthful shine to her face, someone who even the flowers and grasses noticed as she went by. Antonio recognized her as a holy woman. "Antonio, why are you out today alone?" Antonio said, "I have a new child." "I would like to be the madrina for your newborn child. You can be sure I would provide him with justice and mercy mild." Antonio was honored. "Yes, you could provide justice and mercy like no one else, but you are poor. And in this world, there is no power in poverty. No, this child must have something that even you cannot give him." So Antonio continued on his way until there, in a barren piece of dusty land, he saw a woman he did not know by sight. She was tall and thin, so wrapped in cloth that even her mouth was hidden. She moved with the easy grace of someone who was used to going wherever she would. She looked at Antonio and said, "I know you have a new child. I would like to be madrina, such as you're seeking at this hour. You know I surely could provide him with justice, mercy, and with power." Antonio said, "Who are you?" "Antonio, do you not know me? 4 times I have visited your home. I am La Muerta. I am death." "La Muerta? Yes, you are merciful. When wretchedness was no other outlet, you were there to put an end to it. You are just. You take from the rich and poor alike, and there is no power on this earth that can stand to yours. Yes, you will be godmother." And so Antonio turned home, if not happy, then satisfied. His child, Julio, grew well and strong and quickly. When Julio was the age to be a man, his madrina, La Muerta, came to do her offices. She took him into the campos, and there in the woods she showed him the use of every healing herb, many of them unknown to us, so that Julio knew more of healing and the powers of the herbs than any doctor in the land. When his education was complete in this way, she said, "Julio, I have one more gift for you. I will show you this flower." She showed him a pale yellow flower, a flower often overlooked when seen, yet seldom found when sought. This is la hierba de la vida. If you make a medicine from this and give it to the dying, they will come back to life. But two things, Julio. You must withhold it for charity, when life would be more painful. In your eyes, your bright eyes, and the failing eyes of the dying, one will see me at the foot of the bed. If I am there, you may give the dying one la hierba de la vida. But if you see me at the head of the bed, you must not give it, for I have come to claim my own. Well, Julio took his knowledge and went into the world. He went to the palaces of the rich and the hovels of the poor. Everywhere he became known as Julio de los Remedios. Many he cured, and others he said, "It is more kind not to cure." Still to others he said, "No, death has come for this one, and there is no helping." One day, word came that the king of that land was ill. Anyone who could cure him would get half the kingdom. Julio was finally sent for when all the other doctors failed. They sent for Julio de los Remedios. Julio thought, "This is why I was sent into my family. None of us and none of our descendants will ever again know the sharp pain of poverty." He went with confidence to the bed of the king carrying la hierba de la vida. But when he looked, he did not see death at the foot of the bed. There, by the king's head, stood the tall, stern figure of La Muerta. Julio thought, "If only I could cheat her this one time, I would own half the kingdom." Then he shouted, "Air, air, the king needs air. Quickly turn his bed so that his head is near the window." Death was now at the foot of the bed. Julio gave the king la hierba de la vida, and the king stood up. All eyes were on the king except Julio's. He looked into the stern face of his madrina, La Muerta. She extended her long arm toward him and said, "If you do that again, I will come for you." Julio, who had been given Julio de los Remedios in the hovels of the poor, was now Julio of the court. He spent his days with kings and queens and princesses. One princess, the daughter of the king, won his heart. They agreed that they would be married, but 1 week before their wedding day, the princess fell ill. Julio felt that his world had shattered. Then he remembered that he was still Julio de los Remedios. He took la hierba de la vida. It had never failed before. It would not fail now. And he held it to the lips of his beloved. But when he followed her glance, it was not toward the foot of the bed, but to La Muerta, there at the head. Julio thought, "My godmother will not carry out her threat to me. And if she tries, this is my partner in life. This one time I will disobey her." He turned the bed around. Death was now at the foot. Julio gave la hierba de la vida to the princess. He waited for the hand of death, but it did not touch him. La Muerta was gone. A week later, Julio and the princess were married. They spent their wedding night in each other's arms. After Julio had drifted to sleep, there came a knocking at the chamber door. When he opened it, there was the tall figure of La Muerta. She motioned to him, and he followed. He followed her long roads and streams he had never seen. At last they came to a large cavern. He followed her under the ground. They walked for what seemed like miles, down through the twisting cavern, past rocks and shone of their own light, until at last they came to a large space. In it were lights, thousands of candles. One would flicker out here, another would burst into flames there. It seems as if the flames danced from one place to another. Julio said, "What is this?" "These are the lights of people's lives." Julio looked down. There in front of him was a small candle that was nearly burnt out. The wick had fallen over into liquid wax, and the flame sputtered, about to go out. "Who is that?" "Julio, that is yours." "Oh, please, madrina mine, show me mercy." "Julio, I have shown you mercy. What mercy have you shown me? La Muerta pointed a finger at a large candle, solid and strong and round, the wick not yet charred, the flame just flickering into life. Who is this? Julio, that is the candle of your child. Please save my life. I am to be a father. Julio, I have shown you mercy. I have given you power. Now I must show you justice. La Muerta's tall figure bent over and blew out the candle of Julio de los Remedios. Farewell to those I love so well. Do not go searching for me. Farewell, my family and companions. I'm on my final journey.
Bonjour tout le monde. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Madame Numère, and I'm the French teacher here at Akamsit Middle School. So today we're going to take a look at a story in French called La Citrouille Roulant, or the Runaway Pumpkin. So hopefully the pictures will kind of give you an idea of what's happening, but I will translate from here and there. All right, so here we go. Une journée venteuse d'automne, Marla petite descendait la colline en courant et en criant « Aidez-moi, ma citrouille géante roule !» Elle roule en avant et tourne. Aucun signe d'arrêt. « Attention !» crie Marla, tandis que sa citrouille roule en direction de l'étable du fermier. « Ce n'est pas vrai! Qu'est-ce que je ferai? » So Marla, she shouts out to the farmer that her pumpkin is rolling in his direction. And she's like, it can't be possible. What will I ever do? Le fermier dit, rattrape-la avant qu'elle ne roule plus loin. He says, catch it before it gets too far away from you. Attention, crie Marla, tandis que sa citrouille roule en direction du chariot du boulanger. Ce n'est pas vrai. Qu'est-ce que je ferai? Le boulanger dit, vite, rattrape-la avant qu'elle ne roule plus loin. Attention, crie Marla, tandis que sa citrouille roule en direction de la charrette du laitier. Ce n'est pas vrai. Qu'est-ce que je ferai? So Marla shouts out to the milkman, watch out! That her pumpkin is coming in his direction. And once again, she shouts out, how is this possible? Whatever will I do? Le laitier dit, vite, rattrape-la avant qu'elle ne roule plus loin. He says, Marla, catch it quick before it gets too far away. Attention, crie Marla, tandis que sa citrouille roule en direction de la boucherie. And now her pumpkin is rolling towards the butcher. Ce n'est pas vrai! Qu'est-ce que je ferai? How is this possible? Whatever will I do? She says. Le boucher dit, vite, rattrape-la avant qu'elle ne roule plus loin. And once again, the butcher reminds her to quickly grab her pumpkin before it gets too far away. Attention, crie Marla, tandis que sa citrouille roule en direction des marchands du défilé. Now her pumpkin is going to end up in the parade. Ce n'est pas vrai. Qu'est-ce que je ferai? Oh, it's not possible. Whatever will I do? She says. Les marcheurs du défilé disent, vite, rattrape-la avant qu'elle ne roule plus loin. And they remind her, quickly, Marla, grab the pumpkin before it gets too far away. Regardez, une citrouille géante arrive. C'est le meilleur défilé des légumes du monde. People in the town shout, look, it's a giant pumpkin. This is the best vegetable in the parade ever. La chef cuisinière dit vite, les marcheurs seront bientôt ici. Ils seront affamés. Nous devons préparer un banquet. Meanwhile, the cook shouts out that they need to hurry up with the food because the people in the parade are soon going to arrive and they will be very hungry. C'est extraordinaire. Je sais quoi faire. She suddenly has an idea. She knows just what to do. Crie Marla petite, tandis que sa citrouille roule en direction de la chef cuisinière avec un très grand chaudron sur la pelouse. So Marla has an idea as her pumpkin rolls towards the cauldron. D'un geste rapide, elle incline le chaudron et la citrouille géante roule dedans, sans pouvoir en sortir. So she tilts that cauldron over and catches the giant pumpkin. I wonder what she will do next. Enfin, au moins jusqu'à ce que la plus délicieuse soupe à la citrouille soit cuite et servie à tout le monde. Suddenly, they turn that pumpkin into the best pumpkin soup and they serve it to everyone in the parade. La fin. The end. So I hope you enjoyed this story in French, and joyeux Halloween. Happy Halloween.
Hey 6th graders, I'm Jason. I'm a 12th grader, and today I will be reading to you No Trespassing by Se Schlosser. Funny name, okay? Peggy and her boyfriend Tommy were driving down a lonely stretch of highway at dusk when a thunderstorm came crashing down on them. Tommy slowed the car and they crept their way past a formidable abandoned house. Plastered all over the fences and trees were no trespassing signs. A mile past the house, the car hydroplaned. Peggy screamed as the car slid off the road, plunging down into a gully. The car slammed into a large boulder, throwing Peggy violently into the door before it came to a rest under a pecan tree. Her head banged against the window and a stabbing pain shot through her shoulder and arm. Tommy turned to her. "Are you all right? You're bleeding!" "Arm, shoulder, feel bad," Peggy managed to gasp. Tommy glanced cautiously at her right arm. "I think your right arm is broken," he said, and he tore a strip off his shirt and pressed it to the cut on her head. "I'm going to call for help," he said, when it became obvious that the bleeding was not going to stop right away. But neither of them had their cell phones. "That house we just passed, it must have a phone that we can use," Tommy said. Peggy's eyes popped wide open at this statement. Despite her pain, she remembered the creepy abandoned house. "Stay here, a car will come," Peggy managed to gasp. "I can't stay, Peggy," Tommy said. "It could take hours for another car to come, and you're losing way too much blood." He tore another strip off his shirt and placed it gently on the cut on her head. Then he went out and retrieved a couple of blankets from the trunk to cover her with. "I'll be back as soon as I can." He raced out into the storm, shutting the dented door behind him. Peggy drifted into a kind of daze. Something at the back of her mind was making her uneasy. She slid down onto the floor and put her head on the seat, completely covering herself with the blankets, head and all. Feeling safer, she allowed the weariness caused by the wounds to take over, and she fell asleep. Peggy wasn't sure what woke her. Had a beam of light shone briefly through the blanket? Did she hear someone curse outside? She strained eyes and ears, but heard nothing save the soft thudding of the rain, and no light shone through the blanket now. If Tommy had arrived with the rescue squad, there surely would be noise and light and many voices. But she heard nothing, save the swish of the rain and an occasional thumping noise which she put down to the rubbing of the branches of the pecan tree in the wind. The sound should have been comforting, but it was not. Goosebumps crawled across her arms, even the broken one, and she almost ceased breathing for some time as some deep part of her inner mind instructed her to freeze and not make a sound. She did not know how long fear kept her immobile, but suddenly the raw terror ceased. replaced by cold shivers of apprehension and a sick coil in her stomach that had nothing to do with her injuries. Something terrible had happened. She thought wearily, fear adding yet more fatigue to her already wounded body. Then she scolded herself for a ninny. It was just her sore head making her imagine things. Somewhat comforted by the thought, she dozed again, only vaguely aware of a new sound that had not been there before. A soft thud-thud sound as someone gently taps the roof. Thud-thud, pattering of the rain. Thud-thud, silence. Sometimes she would almost waken and listen to it in a puzzled manner. Thud-thud, patter of the rain. Thud-thud. Had a branch dislodged from the tree? Peggy wasn't sure how long she'd been unconscious for, but when she was awakened by a bright light blazing through the window of the car and the sound of male voices exclaiming in horror, a door was wrenched open and someone crawled inside. She lifted her head and she looked up at a young state policeman. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, and then turned over his shoulder to call for help. Peggy told the officers her story and begged them to look for Tommy. They deftly avoided answering her and instead called the paramedics. As the paramedics carried her carefully up the slope of the incline, Peggy looked back at the car, and she saw a grotesque figure hanging from a branch of the pecan tree. For a moment, her brain couldn't decipher what she was seeing in the bright lights of the police car parked outside of the road. Then she heard a thud-thud sound as the foot of the figure scraped the top of the totaled car, and she started screaming over and over in horror. One of the police officers hastened to block her view, and a paramedic fumbled for some Valium to give her as her mind finally registered what she had seen. Tommy's mangled dead body was hanging from the pecan tree just above the car, and nailed to the center of his chest was a no trespassing sign. And that's the end.